when I took an online facilitation class some years ago from John Buck and somebody else who taught the class with him. I was trying to remember who it was. We had an assignment to work with a group to practice the sociocratic facilitation skills during the class. And I wasn't a member of any group that I could practice with, so I discussed it with John, and he suggested setting up a personal top circle. And I said, well, what's a personal top circle? So he explained to me that this is a group of people that I would get together to help me think about any personal or professional issue that I wanted help thinking about. And I said, well, that sounds good, but I don't want to do it just for me. Let me get a group of people together, and each of us will have a turn to get help thinking about some personal or professional issue. So that's what we did. It was very successful. I have since taught the online facilitation class that the Sociocracy Consulting Group offers. I've taught it a number of times, and this is always an option for people to set up a personal top circle. So I've taught other people how to do it, and I've got some success stories from their experiments with it as well. I'd actually like to do it more. I'd like to do it again, not for purposes of the class, but just because it's such a wonderful thing to do. So that's why why I'm making this presentation. So the people who were in the group were people that I invited. Some of them I knew professionally, some of them I knew personally. None of them happened to know each other. A couple of them looked familiar to each other. They had met somewhere. But everybody else, I was the only person that everybody knew. And I chose people that I liked and whose thinking I respected. And when I invited them, I told them why I was inviting them, and being as specific as I could about them. And I said I'm setting this up as a group of people that I like and whose thinking I respect, and I would say something personal about them in addition, and made it seem like an honor that I was inviting them, which it was. And almost everybody that I invited did, except one person really wanted to, but her schedule didn't permit it, but almost everybody else did. I think we had about 5 people in the group, and I think we met for 6 weeks. I gave them a specific term, and I both sent people an email and talked to everybody on the phone about it. So if they could make all 6 meetings, great. If they were going to miss one, no problem. But if they knew in advance that they were going to miss more than that, then it probably didn't make sense for them to be part of the group. The very first meeting was 2 hours, and meetings after that were an hour and a half. That's what was comfortable for people. And at the last meeting, we discussed whether to continue further, and people decided not to. I'll come back to that, what I would do if I were doing the group again. The very first meeting we got to know each other a little bit, and had a big flip chart and in my living room, and we did several rounds for people to come up with ideas that of personal or professional topics that they would love some help thinking about and might use the group for. At first, some people didn't know at all what issues they would bring, or that maybe they thought of one, but we kept doing rounds and people got ideas from other people's topics. And at the end, everybody had 3 or 4 topics at least. That discussion in itself was quite wonderful. I was surprised at how personal and revealing people were able to be, given that none of them knew each other before. For example, there was one man who was going through a very challenging time in his relationship with his son, who had actually been in a mental institution for a short while, and he wanted help in thinking about how to improve his relationship with his son. I was just blown away at that kind of personal topics that people were listing. At the end of listing all of them, then we had to pick a person and a topic for the first session. I wanted to go first because I had a decision that I needed to make in the next few weeks, so it was timely. And I figured I could demonstrate how to do it as well. But I didn't just assume that. We used the election process, because there were a fixed number of possibilities, so I can use the election process, sociocratic election process for it, to choose the topic. And my topic, the topic that I had some timeliness about, was chosen. And I was very glad that I did the election process rather than just announcing I'll go first. Because if I had done that, I wouldn't quite have known, was it really okay with the group or not? And because of the election process, I knew it was okay with the group and I knew why. So that was a great way to start. And then before the end of the evening, we did the election process for the next class, the next meeting. So each time we would do the election process for the next meeting. With the agreement, of course, that everybody would get a turn. So all my topics were out of the running for the second election. Even when we got to the last person in the group, we still did an election to choose among her topics. She could have just chosen one, but this way she had the thinking of the whole group about what topic was the key issue for her. And we might or might not have agreed with what she thought was her key issue. And of course, she had the power of consent when we did the consent round at the end of the last step in the election process. So that if she really didn't want to was not willing to do the topic that we selected, she could object to it. I facilitated all of the sessions with the exception of in the last meeting, I had a second go round, and that meeting I coached somebody else to facilitate. In addition, partway through, one of our assignments in the facilitation class was to use a peer evaluation sheet to give us feedback on our facilitation. So I asked one of my friends in the group if she would be willing to do that, and I went over the form with her ahead of time. So she was taking notes on that during the meeting, and then she and I met afterwards. And that was wonderful. None of these people had any knowledge about sociocracy before, so this was just-in-time training for everybody. And she made wonderful observations that were a lot of help to me in filling out that form and then discussing it afterwards. What the meeting itself looked like in terms of the sociocratic meeting formats, where we started with picture forming, in which the person who was the one talking about their issue in that session gave us their best picture of what the issue was about and all the various parts of it. And then we did a round for picture forming with other people either listing what issues might be involved for the person, or asking questions for additional information and clarity about what they had said. I gave some guidelines for that. We agreed in the first session that everything would be confidential, and I reminded people of that every meeting. In addition, I gave some guidelines about how to ask questions in picture forming. For example, an open-ended question, which is a good kind of question, which is an okay kind of question to ask, might be, have you experienced this kind of thing before? A loaded question that's worded as a yes or no question was, don't you think this has to do with how your mother treated when you were 5 years old? That's a loaded question. So I would give a few examples of that, the questions to avoid, how to make it really open-ended, that we ask questions that we're genuinely curious about and that we ourselves don't already know the answers to, that only that person would know the answer to. After we completed picture forming, we generated proposal ideas. That was pretty much as far as we got for any given meeting. I always ask the person ahead of time, how far would you like to go? Do you want to generate proposal ideas? Do you want to come up with a specific proposal? Or do you want to actually go as far as consent decision making? And everybody elected just to get the proposal ideas. That was as far as we got. But those proposal ideas were extremely useful to people. Let me think what else I want to say about this. Yeah, I think that's it for how we had the meetings. I want to give you a couple of stories. This group was life-changing for several people in the group, and everybody loved coming to it. We were all surprised at how much we got out of discussing other people's issues. we got as much, everybody commented on that, that we got as much out of discussing other people's issues as our own issues, because it turned out there's so many similar threads for all of us. One woman had a job at the time in a toxic work environment, and her thinking was just never validated there. She found these meetings just wonderful because it was so clear to her that her thinking about other people was so useful to people. It was such a validation for her each time. There was another woman who had recently been laid off of a job, was trying to make a decision as to whether to look for another job or start her own business, which she had been thinking about doing for years. She was so demoralized by being laid off that she was pretty much immobilized and unable to move in either direction. I couldn't even tell that anything had shifted during the evening. That was her topic, was what's her next career move. And, but I found out several months later that she got a job. This wasn't somebody that I knew well. I wasn't in frequent contact with her. She got a job that she was very happy with, and that she credited that evening with unlocking something that had been jammed for her. So she got unstuck and was able to start looking for a job in earnest. And she still has that job several years later and is still happy in it. So those are just a couple of the things in it, a couple of the success stories from it. What I'd like to do now is to have a round with either what ideas do you have for where or with whom you might want to set up a personal top circle, or to ask me a question about how we did the personal top circle, or both of those in your turn in the round. This could be done with a group of friends. I can see that it could be done with a group of business leaders, either in the same organization or from different organizations, to help each other, to think well about each other and help each other move in any areas where they need to unmove. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see you during the round. Let me just see what, yeah. So if you want to make note of what this question is, if you need help remembering it, either ask me a question about the personal top circle, or what ideas do you have for where or with whom you might want to set up a personal top circle. And now let me see how to, whoops. I have to find, oh, stop share, there it is. Okay, now I can see everybody again. Good. So, let's see, yeah, everybody, Ellie says that she's heard this called the mastermind group. This has things in common with what's called a mastermind group. Okay, so I'm going to just start around the screen and for your turn in the round. So I'll start with Claudia and then go to Kristen. And be sure to unmute yourself when it's your turn.
Sheila, you know you have 25 people, by the way.
Oh, I did not know that I have 25 people because I can only see some of them. Aha.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jerry, do you have any suggestions for how to do this round efficiently, especially given that I can't see everybody?
And you should be able to see everybody if you, on your Zoom screen, there should be little arrows on the left or right side that you can see the rest of the people.
Right.
And some of them who we can't see maybe actually be watching something else at the same time. We don't really know who's really present. So
okay.
You can, just call on people and just move it quickly along as people don't respond.
Okay, Claudia and then Kristen.
Is it okay if I ask a question?
Yes, that's the purpose of this.
Okay, I have a question about your election process.
Yes.
What was your election process for? Was it sounded like it was for selecting your topics, and did each person have a number of topics? What was your election process?
Each person had a number of topics, that's correct. We spent the first meeting we spent the first meeting listing all of our topics and with the person's name by each one. So we did it by topic, but it was all, but the person's name was linked to it.
So when
And you can use the election process for any fixed number of possibilities. We had a finite number of possibilities.
so when it came, so did you so each meeting was that that delegated to one person, and that person got used the election process for their topics?
Not exactly. The first time we had, if there were 5 people and each one had an average of 3 topics, there were 15 topics. We had an election among all 15 topics.
Oh, okay.
Then for the second meeting, my 3 topics would be removed because I had already had my turn. That would leave 12 possibilities for the election. And even the last time, there were the 3 or 4 possibilities of the one person who hadn't had a turn.
So the person who was on stage for that night didn't necessarily have one of his or her topics being discussed that meeting?
The topic determined, when we had the election, that determined who would be next in the lineup.
Okay, got it.
Okay, Kristen and then Roger.
I don't have any questions. I'll let somebody else go if they have questions.
And if you want to say something, what ideas do you have for where with whom you might want to set up a personal top circle? That's another option for the round. Okay, we'll go to Roger and then John Lewis.
Hi, Sheila. I have 2 quick questions. One is, when you were, so from what you just said about how you chose topics, it sounds like in the beginning a person could have several topics, but once one of their topics came up, that was all they did. Was the person influential in any way in like which of their topics got chosen by the group? That's the first question. And the second question is simply, if a lot of folks, if these folks weren't aware of sociocracy, like how did you phrase that first email, and how did I would be frankly timid about like approaching a whole bunch of people that don't know anything about sociocracy, saying, "Hey guys, you want to do this sociocratic thing with me?" It seems a hard ask.
Well, so I answered the first one first, and now it's early morning here for me. Remind me of what the first question was.
About, did the person have any influence in which of their topics was chosen?
Sure, they're one of the people making nominations in the Sociocratic election, and then there's a change round. So it's all the regular steps in the Sociocratic election.
Was it ever the case that someone wanted one of their topics, but it wound up being a different one? It was sort of like
yes,
really wanted to dig in.
Yes, it did, but the person got to hear the group's thinking as to why this other topic was the key topic for them, and they could object. But they had the benefit of getting other people's thinking about them. Well, so I worded, in some cases I sent out the email first, in some cases I called the person first. I did have a phone conversation with everyone before the group started. I didn't phrase it as a Sociocratic group. I phrased it as a group of people I don't remember exactly what I said. I wish I still had a copy of it, but a group of people to help to think about each other, where we each get help thinking about one of our issues. And the other purpose of it was to help me learn a new method of facilitation for the class that I'm taking. I don't even remember if I mentioned the word sociocracy there. And I set out the aims for the group. There were 2 aims, and those were the 2 aims. Okay, John, and then Steve Bebb, I think. John.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciated everything you've just gone through. I think to share a couple of ideas I've had. Okay, thanks. The one is a group of people who I've got into touch with who, in recent weeks, who are leaving a sort of fundamentalist church group that I was brought up with, and they're all on the fringes, and I've kind of gone through that process myself, and I think there's sort of quite a lot of soul searching and understanding what's going on. It feels like that might be a good application for something like this, where there's a lot of, not everyone's arrived at the same place, but there could be some mutual sort of support through that. And the other is also just a group of people I'm loosely in touch with who, career-wise, are also trying to think about how their passion sort of meets a real need in the world and those sorts of things. And again, that feels like there's a commonality there. I suppose, does having a common thread to the group matter? I suppose, does that help is a question. And the other one is there a place any resources I can have or you could link to that explain what you did that, that I can refer back to later.
So the first question, I would think it would work fine to have a common thread. This is my one experience doing it, but absolutely. And as far as a resource, you'll have this recording to listen to again. And I've been saying for several years, ever since I did that I need to write this up. So this is, you have my permission, in fact, my request to, like, every couple of weeks, send me an email to nudge me. Okay, Steve and then Pierre.
Yeah, well, actually, I think the lady that spoke first sort of answered my question. It was about the processes. I think I'm fairly new to Sociocracy, so I'm still sort of understanding the principles more, but more so the processes. And I actually sit next to John, who you just spoke to. So we're going through a process together here, but I just wanted to thank you really as a comment for more broadly for enlightening us about the processes. So I'll look more into your consultancy and try and learn a bit more. So thanks for that.
Okay, and feel free to send me an email if if you've got questions as you're trying to do it. Okay, Pierre and then Barbara.
Okay, thank you. It was very inspiring and gave me some ideas to do it. I was just to tell you what I've done. I experimented myself, and it is a bit similar, but it's more like inner sociocracy. So I had a big trouble at the moment, and I felt I have really conflicting voice in myself on one thing I have to decide. So I just had this flash, that idea. I say, okay, let's write down each of them on a post-it. So what this person, let's call it a person, is telling me in essence, in really the real essence, and put it in front of me, and post it like it was a circle. And then I produced a proposal. I asked the objection from each of them. And then it came out a very wonderful proposal that works very well. It was very, and so there is different possibility to have a top circle. What I will call this, it was an inner top circle. And hearing you, I was able to remember this, and I would like to develop this more. And I would like to try also what you have explained, because it was very enriching. Thank you.
Great. And I just put my email in the chat. So let's see, Barbara and then Matthew.
I'm part of a group that's starting an intentional community, and part of the work that we're doing, we call each other on a Saturday morning at 8, and it's called the Power of 8. It's an intention setting circle. So it kind of reminds me of that, where we bring forth something from the individuals in the group, and then we have a set intention, and it's a time of, we take 10 minutes to really focus on that, and then we go off on our day and see what the results are. So I think the results piece of it is very powerful. From what you said, it's life-changing for people. I think we do some of this kind of a thing with the intention setting piece. And so I'm very curious about this, and maybe there's more applications in my life. Thank you.
Nice. I said who's next, but I just realized we're running out of time. Is there anybody who has a really burning question or comment that you would be very disappointed if you didn't get to say before we stop? And just speak up, because I can't see everybody on the screen in terms of waving your hand. Okay, I think we can take one more. Matthew, did I say you next? Matthew, did you want to say something? Yeah, good.
I'm really interested in using this with a group of people who are interested in refining our sociocratic facilitation skills, so that we can grow together, both in what we're exploring and in our ability to facilitate. So I really appreciate the suggestion.
Great. There was a question in the chat from Ellie, how to deal with participants who are guarded and see other participants as competitors. I didn't have to worry about being competitors, because this was a group of people who did not know each other and weren't working in the same field. Participants who were guarded, I was shocked right from the beginning that people really let down their guard. I think that's in part, it's possible that with whether or not I was conscious of it, I'm not, how conscious of it, I'm not sure, but I think it may be in part who I invited. And I think that has a lot to do with the facilitation. I saw that as my job as the facilitator was to create a safe environment for people. And people were guarded or not guarded, as you know, that's their choice, and everybody got a lot out of it. So thanks for your participation, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the conference.